Is the air in your country racist? Well, it just might be. Now, I'm going to pick on an article that's actually from 2014, which shows that people of color in the United States disproportionately have lower quality air than other areas of the country. Now, the author, having written for Mother Jones, which is a liberal rag, tends to blame white people for this. Now, see, the problem is that I'm sure air quality disproportionately affects people of color, but it doesn't do that because they're people of color. It does that because they're disproportionately lower income. Well, they tend to be lower on the economic ladder. But it's interesting how this is the point that I've been always trying to make about identity politics. They think it's about race. Because there are plenty of poor people poor white people who breathe poor quality air. And in fact, the commonality is that they're lower income people. That's kind of the point. You have rich black people that breathe cleaner air too. But you see the jump. They automatically jump to race as the first thing, when really air quality is about economics. It is about class. It's not about race. Because the bad air in these areas aren't because they're people of color or because they're white, but because of their social standing. And it disproportionately does affect people of color, don't get me wrong. But color is not the basis. Class is the basis. And this is the nonsense of liberalism and how liberalism essentially ends up defending the status quo. They can point to an injustice, but then completely fail to understand why it happens, and then essentially argue nothing to do anything about it. What's their solution? To make white people have worse air? I mean, if you're going to tackle air quality, that's an economic issue. That's something you're going to have to take to businesses, regulate their pollutions. Then you can make the whole separate argument about cleaner forms of energy, etc. And all of those being economic things. And economic things are based on class. So I just wanted to give it a perfect example of how identity politics completely obscures the source of real oppression in the world. And besides, in China, there is very poor air quality in places where there are poor people. But the rich people are Chinese and the poor people are Chinese. So is it still white people's fault? I'm pointing out the absurdity of taking an economic phenomenon and blaming it on race rather than on what is actually responsible for it, and that would be economics. Now, economics can justify racism. And we saw most of the history of slavery came about as wanting to be able to identify a slave class, and then race becomes, and there's the whole big thing that's beyond the scope of this video. It's like the idea that, it's white imperialism that destroyed my country. No, imperialism destroyed your country. Imperialism is an economic phenomenon. It's not a racial one. Imperialism doesn't happen because white people. Imperialism happens after a certain stage in the development of capitalism. And whether they're black or white, it would still happen. If history was reversed and it was white people who lived in the poor countries and black people who lived in the rich countries, imperialism still would have happened because it's an economic phenomenon, not a racial one. Imperialism is not the product of racism. Racism is the product of imperialism. It's the opposite to what they claim. We've all seen that guy with the thing, imperialism, how white people fucked up my country. But that's not how it works. And again, we see this distraction from imperialism and essentially capitalism being the problem. A system of private property, a mass accumulation of wealth, concentration of capital, etc., extending beyond the borders of the country. This is not about race. This is economics. You can bemoan racism all you want, and you should. Racism is a bad thing. But the basis of this is economics. And if you just want to bang the gavel and scream white people evil, you're not going to solve anything. I mean, go ahead, hate white people all you want. You're not going to solve the problem, because the problem is economic, not racial. And it would be equally true if it were the other way around. So just let that sit as an example of how it is that identity politics ends up distracting from the real cause of many of the social ills in society. Believe it or not everything is about race. Sometimes it's actually about the structure of a system in general, and that would be economic. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.